The European Union has laid out its migration policy plan for the next 5 years. The aim is to bring in stricter and faster immigration controls. Now, the key features include mandatory border screenings with identity, health, and security checks, more use of a common database, including facial and fingerprint biometric data, and swifter border procedures for asylum seekers unlikely to qualify for protected status. That would ensure that those with no legal right to stay can be returned home without delay. The current EU presidency, Cyprus, has been especially successful at sending back failed migrants. Other members are closely watching the island's policy, as DW's Tessa Walter reports.
Ahmad struggles to look at photos of his 2 children. His son and daughter are back in Syria with their mother, while he decided to stay behind in Cyprus to work. As a refugee, he asked us not to reveal his real name or identity, fearing repercussions from the authorities.
I miss my children a lot. I mean, I haven't seen them in 8 months, and I was hoping that after 2 months I would see them.
At the Cyprus Refugee Council, Ahmad is seeking help with his case. Like many Syrian refugees, he agreed for his family to return voluntarily after being promised a work permit in return. But 7 months later, that has still not been issued.
I am not satisfied. I still really need this permit. I just want to care for my family. That was the deal, that I can work here for a while and be able to help them financially.
Although numbers have recently gone down, Cyprus has seen some of the highest asylum application rates in the entire European Union relative to the small size of its population of around 1 million. The government's response? Prioritizing returns, and other European countries now want to follow suit. Cyprus government argues that voluntary and forced returns are essential.
There's a lot of people here in Cyprus, a small island with limited capacity, so it is necessary for us to ease the burden on our infrastructure.
The Mediterranean island lies close to the Middle East, where many people have fled war and instability. Cyprus's own history of conflict also shapes attitudes towards migration. Since Turkey invaded the north in 1974, the island remains divided, a reality that still influences how some residents view newcomers.
There are too many, because we've got a half of the island, only the half of the island.
We should protect its people and show solidarity.
When you have a big number in your demographics, you need to start looking at how do you incorporate, are you doing it the right way?
If they stay here, what kind of future they can have? Because we have our own problems with our economy.
Critics of Cyprus's return policy argue that the country, like much of Europe, faces an aging population and growing labour shortages and would profit from the extra pairs of hands.
The feedback that we get from employers on a daily basis is that they are losing people that are very, very needed in the country, and they have no other legal routes in order to switch them to another status and keep them here.
The government says it is following up on cases like Ahmad's as quickly as possible, and that more than 150 other work permits have already been issued to other Syrian applicants, the big majority. In the meantime, he has made up his mind.
Right now, there is no work in Syria. But if I stay here in Cyprus for a year and a bit, earn some money, then I can go back, find a job there, because things over there are getting better.
As migration policies are tightening, more refugees across the EU may soon have to take a similar decision.
And for more, I'm joined now by Helena Hahn. She's a migration policy analyst with the Brussels think tank, the European Policy Center. Helen, it's good to have you on the program. When we look at the bullet points here of this migration policy, I mean, the measures look like very reasonable, almost commonsensical measures. So is this really the EU tightening its migration policy, or is the real story here that the EU is finally getting its migration act together?
I think it's a combination of both. The success that we saw with the agreement on the Migration Pact in 2024 was a big step, considering that there were many years of negotiations with no results leading up to it. the same time, we do see a generally restrictive approach to migration and asylum at the moment that many heads of government are supporting and pushing for. The real question is, however, even if there are new and tighter rules in place, what will it look like in practice? Will it actually help to achieve a more manageable situation in Europe?
You know, as well as many of us, that there are plenty of examples over the last decade of EU migration policies failing due to one country or two countries not willing to share the burden, for example. Why would we think this time around that EU members will genuinely cooperate with each other?
It's the million-dollar question at the end of the day. I think at this point in time, a lot of member states are aware of the political stakes. They're aware of the pressures by their electorates. And so there's also a public expectation that governments will take matters into their hands. At the same time, however, there is this fine line between what is often called solidarity and taking on responsibility for processing asylum seekers. And that is a very delicate balance where even in the new system, where member states can offer solidarity in different ways, be it through financial payments or through material contributions or through relocating asylum seekers, there's still a question of what that will look like in practice and whether it's the kind of a chicken and egg if one end isn't held up, if the other one will do the same.
And I'm wondering too how these changes will be greeted by those political forces that want greater restrictions on migration. There are far-right parties here in Europe, but even centrist parties, centrist voters, they say time and time again that they are not satisfied with what is happening at the border of the European Union. How do you think the reaction is going to be?
I think it depends a little bit. For those that are really at the very end of the spectrum, of the far-right spectrum, who are also against the project of the European Union, they are likely not very supportive of the policy as a whole because their ambitions go above and beyond of what is set out in the pact. When it comes to other parties there, we do see that there's a lot of appetite on the side of member states to explore other means to reduce irregular migration. And it's for that reason that we have seen discussions around so-called return hubs or also this notion of safe third countries, which will make it once adopted, easier to essentially reject people's asylum applications because, so the argument goes, they have traveled through a so-called safe third country, which will be countries in the EU's immediate neighborhood.
This migration policy calls for faster processing of migrants and asylum seekers, but does faster processing, does that necessarily mean a stricter policy?
No, not necessarily. I mean, fast is important in the sense that one of the main issues that we have seen in the common European asylum system in the past years is the increasing backlogs and the difficulties for national administrations to essentially grant people the decision and to inform them about their status at a much earlier point in time. There are legal obligations. It's not like there are not timelines, but if these aren't respected, then that creates systematic problems. And so the idea behind the pact is that there are stricter timelines. There is an increased obligation on the side of national administrations as well as the judiciary to comply with these. Again, there is the expectation and then there's the reality. But that has been a massive focus on the side of member states to make sure that they comply with these timelines once the pact is fully implemented.
Helena Hahn with the European Policy Center. Helena, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you. And for more, I'm joined now by Jean-Nicolas Beuze. He's with the UNHCR, that's the UN's refugee agency. Mr. Beuze, it's good to have you with us. I know that you have been involved in briefing the European Union leaders on immigration issues and this 5-year plan. Does the European Commission's plan, does it align with the wishes of UNHCR?
So on one side, we have the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum, which has been negotiated for 10 years and which will enter into force in June this year. As you mentioned in the reportage, there will be border procedures by which people will be more rapidly assessed to know whether they are fleeing conflict, persecution, and therefore must be granted asylum in Europe and cannot return home because they will suffer irreparable harm. This is a progress. And like Ahmad was saying, all the refugees who come to Europe want to become rapidly independent, so they need their case to be processed very rapidly. But that needs to be done properly with some safeguard to protect the interests and the rights of the asylum seeker. On the other side, as Cyprus and other countries, we need to enhance the capacity to send back people who have come to Europe but have not been assessed as refugees.
Okay. The plan promising faster processing of asylum seekers, are you confident that migrants will be properly protected under this scheme, or do you have any concerns?
So the path is very clear. It provides for legal aid, for example, for people to be able to navigate the process at the border, which is quite complicated, often in a foreign language, not knowing how to present your case, with some lawyers at your disposal. So the path also says that people should not be detained during this process, because that would not a dignified way to welcome people to Europe, especially those who ultimately will be recognized as refugees and will stay in our communities. So there are quite a number of positive measures in the pact, but no, it's on the member state to implement them.
There is a lot of talk, particularly here in Germany, about when is the right time for refugees to go home, particularly Syrian refugees that are in this country. I know that you are an advocate of the go and see trips, allowing the Syrian refugees to go back to Syria to see for themselves if it's safe. What do you say to the sizable amount of voters here in Germany who say if it's safe enough for go and see, then it should be safe enough for them to go home permanently?
I would say that many refugees, Syrian refugees in Europe, are not tempted to go and see. It's mainly those who are living in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, who live in very dire situation, who want to compare their situation in exile with their situation in Syria. Some of them have decided spontaneously to return, but the scale of the return really outweighs the capacity, the absorption capacity of the public services in Syria, in terms of access to education, access to health, access to decent livelihood opportunities, security, getting back their identity document, and so on and so forth. So if we want to avoid a risk of revolving door, we need to make sure that when people, refugees from Syria, decide to return, they are really accompanied to do that in a sustainable and dignified manner, because otherwise they will just go and come back because they, again, their life may be at risk.
The migration policy, this 5-year plan that the European Union has put together, do you see it as a policy of the U.S. maybe catching up to the realities on the ground, or do you see this as just maybe more lip service that is being given as we've had in the past?
We need to reassure the public opinion. The migration narrative has often been plagued by alternative facts or policies which were decided more to reassure some segment of the population or some segment of political parties. It's important that with the European Union, we rationalize a little bit the debate about migration. First, there are less and less people coming. 25% less people came in 25 compared to 24 to ask for asylum in Europe. Second, as we heard from our Cyprus friends, there is a need demographically, financially, economically, in terms of labor shortage. There is a need for Europe also to get some so-called new blood. So we need to be very mindful that the policies need to be pragmatic, long-term, sustainable, within the law and within our European values, because at the end of the day, the majority of people in Europe wants to protect those who are fleeing conflict and persecution.
Mr. Beuze, before we run out of time, let me ask you, do you believe member states of the European Union will be able to agree on sharing responsibility? They haven't been able to do that in the past always.
We have seen a slow but definitely solid start of the solidarity mechanisms by which the frontline countries like Cyprus, Greece, Italy, or Spain will be compensated by countries in Europe who have received less asylum seekers and refugees by relocating some of those refugees, paying financial support, technical support, so that there is indeed an equilibrium. And that's what is all about a common asylum system in the European Union.
Okay. Jean-Nicolas Beuze with the UNHCR. Mr. Beuze, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.